I made the decision to visit my husband's pregnant mistress in the hospital. Not to scream, not to cry, but to look her in the eyes and finally understand what she possessed that 27 years of marriage couldn't give me. I needed to see the woman carrying his child, the baby he promised me we were too old to have. But when I pushed open that hospital room door, I found something far worse than the mistress I came to confront. I found my husband living a life I didn't even know existed. My purse slipped from my trembling hands, and the sound of it hitting the floor was the sound of my entire world shattering. Before I tell you what I saw in that room, what no wife should ever have to witness, I want to pause here. I'm so grateful you're here with me today. If you're watching this, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I need you to tell me in the comments which city you're listening to this story from. I want to know just how far this message has traveled, because what I'm about to share with you needs to be heard by every woman who thinks she's going crazy, every wife who's been called too emotional, and every person who's ever been gaslit into doubting their own reality. The hospital corridors stretched endlessly before me that Thursday afternoon, each step echoing against the polished linoleum like a countdown to my own execution. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that cold, sterile glow that makes everything look sickly and unreal. My breath came in shallow gasps that I tried desperately to control. I clutched my leather purse against my chest like armor, my knuckles bone white from gripping the straps so tightly that my wedding ring, 27 years on my finger, 27 years of promises, cut into my skin until I could feel it bruising. Room 407. I had memorized that number like a prayer, like a curse, like the combination to a safe holding all my darkest fears. It had taken me 3 weeks to work up the courage to come here. 3 weeks of sleepless nights staring at the ceiling while Marshall slept peacefully beside me. 3 weeks of forcing down food that tasted like ash. 3 weeks of watching my husband slip away from me one lie at a time, one late night at a time, one don't wait up text message at a time. But I was done being the fool. I was done pretending I didn't see the signs. I was done being the understanding wife who made excuses for him. The scent of disinfectant burned my nostrils as I stood outside her door, harsh and chemical, stripping away any remaining illusions I'd been clinging to. Janet Ford, 28 years old, 6 months pregnant. That's all I knew about the woman who had been sharing my husband's bed for God knows how long. 28! When I was 28, I was already building my career, already planning my wedding to Marshall, already laying the foundation for what I believed would be our forever. Janet Ford wasn't even born yet when I said, I do. She wasn't even alive when I was making the sacrifices that would later fund the life Marshall was now building with her. My hand trembled violently as I reached for the door handle, and I had to grip my wrist with my other hand to steady it. Through the small rectangular window, I could see the edge of a hospital bed. White sheets, pristine and tucked tight, machines beeping steadily in the background. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my mirror at home, practicing in the pre-dawn darkness before Marshall woke up. I would walk in with my head held high, dignity intact, spine straight. I would look at her, really look at her, and I would ask her one simple question. Was he worth destroying a family for? Was my husband worth the devastation of 2 grown children who would never look at their father the same way again? I steadied my breathing the way I'd learned during 15 years working in medical billing, dealing with insurance companies and family emergencies and people's lives reduced to codes and numbers. In through the nose, out through the mouth. You've handled worse than this, Nadea. You've navigated financial disasters that could have destroyed families. You've sat across from people receiving the worst news of their lives and maintained your composure. You've been the calm in countless storms. You can handle looking at one home-wrecking girl in a hospital bed. You can handle seeing the woman pregnant with your husband's child. But nothing in my 53 years of life, nothing in my 27 years of marriage, nothing in all my experience with human suffering could have prepared me for what I saw when I pushed open that door. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden glow across the room like some twisted romantic movie scene, like something out of a fairy tale where the princess gets rescued and lives happily ever after. And there, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed with his back to me, was my husband, my Marshall, the man who had kissed me goodbye that very morning and told me he was heading to the office for an important client meeting that would take all day, the man who had held me on our wedding night and promised to forsake all others, the man who had been working late every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 months, coming home smelling like expensive cologne I'd never bought him. He was holding a plastic spoon, carefully feeding soup to the woman lying in the bed, one tender mouthful at a time. But let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what was destroyed in that hospital room. You need to know what 27 years of devotion looks like when it crumbles in a single moment. I met Marshall when I was 26, working the reception desk at a small law firm in downtown Houston. He was 24, a newly hired junior associate with holes in his dress shoes and ambition burning in his eyes like a fever. He used to stay late every night, poring over case files in the conference room long after everyone else had gone home. I thought he was the most dedicated man I'd ever met. "Just trying to prove myself," he told me one evening when I brought him coffee I'd made before leaving. "One day, I'm going to make partner. One day, I'm going to give my family everything they deserve." I believed him. More than that, I invested in him. When Marshall decided to pursue his MBA while working full-time, I picked up weekend shifts doing medical billing to help cover the tuition his firm wouldn't pay. When he needed new suits for client meetings, I learned to shop sales and alteration racks, making $20 jackets look like $200. When he was too exhausted to cook or clean or remember to eat, I became his anchor, his home base, his everything. "You're building our future," I used to tell myself during those exhausting 16-hour days, my back aching from hunching over paperwork, my eyes burning from computer streams. This sacrifice means something. We got married at City Hall on a Tuesday afternoon because Marshall couldn't take time off work for a big wedding. I wore a cream dress from Macy's clearance rack. We had 2 witnesses, my cousin Valerie and his college roommate. But when he slipped that something gold band on my finger and promised to love me for better or worse, I believed we could weather anything. Those early years were lean but hopeful. We lived in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment where you could hear every word the neighbors said through paper-thin walls. But we were building something together. By the time Marshall made partner 8 years later, we had our house, a beautiful brick colonial in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. We had our children, too. Marcus, born when Marshall finally felt financially stable, and Simone, who came 3 years later, completing what I thought was our perfect family. Those were the golden years. Marshall would come home and tell me about his cases over dinner, while Marcus and Simone chattered about soccer practice and science projects. We took family vacations to San Antonio and Galveston. We hosted backyard barbecues where Marshall would grill steaks and tell stories that made everyone laugh. I thought we had made it. I thought we were living proof that sacrifice and loyalty could build something unbreakable. But children grow up, dreams shift, and apparently so do the men you build your entire life around. It started small. Marshall began working later. 3 nights a week became 4, then 5. He changed his phone password, something he'd never done in 23 years of marriage. New cologne appeared in our bathroom. Designer shirts I'd never seen before hung in his closet. When I complimented his new style, trying to reconnect with the man who seemed to be slipping away, he brushed me off like I had embarrassed him. "Just trying to stay current, Nadea. You wouldn't understand the pressure at the farm." The late nights became routine. Our conversations became transactional. "The lawn needs mowing. Your mother called. I'll be home late. Don't wait up." We moved around each other like polite strangers sharing the same space. Our 20-year marriage reduced to a list of household tasks and scheduling conflicts. And when I tried to address it, when I suggested date nights or weekend getaways or even just dinner together without our phones, he made me feel like I was suffocating him. "We're not 25 years old anymore, Nadea," he said one evening when I asked if something was wrong, his voice edged with irritation. "I need space to breathe." But I wasn't asking to be attached at the hip. I was asking to feel like his wife instead of his housekeeper. I was asking him to look at me the way he used to, like I was someone worth coming home to. The opportunity to confirm my fears came 3 weeks after our 27th anniversary, an anniversary he forgot until I reminded him at dinner. Marshall had rushed out for an emergency client call, leaving his phone charging on the kitchen counter. My heart hammered in my chest as I picked it up, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I entered what I prayed was still his passcode, our wedding date. It worked. I scrolled through his contacts with the methodical precision I'd learned from 15 years of processing insurance claims. Thorough, systematic, looking for the anomaly. Most names were familiar. His partners at the firm, his brother, his college friends. But then I saw it, tucked between James, Jim, and Jim, client, Janet. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked on the name with a finger that didn't feel like my own. The number meant nothing to me, but seeing it there, seeing her name in his phone with that little red heart, made everything real in a way I wasn't prepared for. This wasn't paranoia, this wasn't middle-aged insecurity or empty nest syndrome or any of the things Marshall had been subtly suggesting when I questioned his behavior. This was confirmation. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it, my hands trembling, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. When Marshall returned 20 minutes later, I was folding laundry in the living room, playing the role of the oblivious wife who suspected nothing. "How was the call?" I asked without looking up from his dress shirts. "Fine, just fine. Client emergency, you know how it is." But I was beginning to realize I didn't know how anything was anymore. It was the first crack in the glass, and I was still praying it was just a reflection. The next day, while Marshall was at work, I did something I never thought I'd do in 27 years of marriage. I went through his things. Not snooping, I told myself, investigating. There's a difference when your whole life is at stake. I started with the obvious places: his home office, the filing cabinet he thought I never touched, the drawer in his nightstand. Credit card statements showed charges I didn't recognize, restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in Houston when he claimed to be working late at the office, a jewelry purchase for $847. I never received jewelry. But I needed help. I needed someone who could see what I was too close to see, someone who understood how men hide money and build escape routes while their wives sleep beside them, trusting and unaware. I called my cousin Valerie. Valerie had worked as a family law paralegal for 15 years. She'd seen every variation of betrayal, every creative way men dismantled marriages while keeping their hands clean. When I told her about Janet's name and Marshall's phone, about the late nights and the unexplained expenses, she didn't tell me I was overreacting. She didn't suggest marriage counseling or communication workshops. She said, "Get me access to the bank accounts, all of them, and his laptop if you can." It took me 3 days to gather everything: statements, passwords I found in his desk drawer, login information for accounts I didn't even know existed. When Valerie spread it all across her dining room table, the evidence of my husband's double life laid out like an autopsy, I felt my hands go numb. "Nadia," she said quietly, running her finger down a bank statement. "Look at this. Consulting fees, gift reimbursement, business expense. He's been transferring money for months." The numbers blurred before my eyes. $800 here, $1,200 there, $2,500 last month alone, all going to an account under the name J. Ford. "There's more," Valerie continued, pulling up something on her laptop. "He opened a separate online banking account tied to his personal email, the one you don't have access to. He's been moving money systematically, not enough at once to trigger alerts, but enough to fund a whole second household. My throat closed. How much? Over the past 8 months, close to $30,000. I gripped the table to keep from falling. $30,000? Money that should have gone toward our retirement, our mortgage, our future. Money I'd helped earn through all those weekend shifts and overtime hours. But Valerie wasn't finished. She pulled out another document, her expression darkening. "This is from his company insurance portal," she said, turning her laptop toward me. "He added a domestic partner to his coverage 6 months ago. That's insurance fraud, Nadia. He listed Janet Ford as his partner while he's still legally married to you. He's been using marital funds to cover her medical expenses." The room tilted. My vision tunneled. "Medical expenses?" I repeated slowly, my voice sounding distant and strange even to my own ears. "What kind of medical expenses?" Valerie's eyes met mine, and I saw pity there, the kind of pity that precedes devastation. She said, "Prenatal care. She's pregnant, Nadia, 6 months along." The world stopped spinning. My heart stopped beating. Everything stopped except the terrible, crushing weight of that single word, pregnant. The same man who told me 3 years ago that we were too old for another baby, that our family was complete, that he didn't want to start over with diapers and sleepless nights. That man was having a baby with someone else. Over the next 2 weeks, Valerie helped me dig deeper. We hired a private investigator, a woman named Rosa who specialized in infidelity cases and came highly recommended. What she uncovered made the bank statements look like mercy. There were photos of Marshall at a prenatal clinic, his hand on Janet's back as they walked through the parking lot. Surveillance footage showed him entering her apartment building every Tuesday and Thursday evening, the nights he claimed to be working late at the office. In one video, he was carrying boxes labeled baby furniture. In another, he was unloading bags from Babies R Us. Rosa's final report included a detail that nearly broke me. Marshall attended a prenatal class with Janet, preparing for fatherhood. The class was called. There was a photo of them sitting in a circle with other expectant couples, Marshall's hand resting protectively on his swollen belly, both of them smiling like this was normal, like this was right, like they were just another happy couple preparing to welcome their first child. Not their first, his third. But apparently I didn't exist in that version of his life. "There's one more thing," Valerie said when she called me on a Wednesday afternoon. Her voice sounded strange, careful, like she was delivering news to a patient who might not survive it. "Janet was admitted to the hospital yesterday. Pregnancy complications, preeclampsia from what I could gather. She's at Memorial Hermann in the medical center." My hands went cold. "How do you know that?" Marshall requested emergency family leave from his firm, listed himself as her emergency contact. I sat down on my kitchen floor, the same floor where I'd packed school lunches for our children, where I'd shared morning coffee with Marshall for over 2 decades, where I had built the illusion of a life that was now revealed to be nothing but smoke and mirrors. "Nadia," Valerie said gently, "what do you want to do?" I looked at my wedding ring, at the gold band that had left a permanent indent in my finger after 27 years. I thought about all the ways I'd made excuses for him, all the times I'd swallowed my suspicions and chosen trust over truth. "I want to see her," I heard myself say. "I need to see them together. I need to know this is real." Because some part of me, some desperate, dying part, was still hoping this was all a terrible mistake. I wasn't ready for the truth, but the truth was ready for me. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror that Thursday morning, trying on 3 different outfits before settling on a simple navy blouse and black pants. Not too casual, not trying too hard. I wanted to look like a woman who had her life together, even though I was falling apart from the inside out. My hands shook as I applied lipstick, the same shade I'd worn on our wedding day. I don't know why that mattered to me. Maybe I wanted him to remember what he was throwing away. Maybe I wanted to look like the wife he'd once chosen before I became the wife he was discarding. I practiced what I would say. In the mirror, to my reflection, I rehearsed the words over and over. "I know about the baby. I know about the money. I know everything. But even in the privacy of my own bedroom, my voice cracked on the word everything. The drive to Memorial Hermann took 35 minutes, but it felt like crossing into another country. I gripped this steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. At every red light, memories assaulted me. Marshall proposing on one knee in our tiny apartment, the way he'd cried when Marcus was born, dancing in our kitchen on our 10th anniversary. 27 years of moments that I thought meant something, now revealed to be nothing but smoke and mirrors. My phone rang twice. Marshall's name flashed on the screen both times. I let it go to voicemail. Doubt crept in with every mile. What if Valerie was wrong? What if there was an explanation? What if I walked into that hospital room and discovered this was all a horrible misunderstanding? But even as I thought it, I knew I was lying to myself. The evidence was too clear. The pattern too obvious. I was simply a woman hoping for mercy in a situation that had none to give. When I finally reached the hospital, I sat in the parking garage for 15 minutes, unable to move. My wedding ring felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I twisted it around and around my finger, a nervous habit I'd had since the day Marshall slipped it on. I thought about turning around. I thought about going home, pretending I'd never found Janet's name in his phone, never discovered the bank transfers, never learned about the baby. I could go back to being the oblivious wife who made excuses and looked the other way. But I couldn't unknow what I knew. And I couldn't unlive what I'd already lived through these past weeks. The sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, the feeling of going insane while everyone told me I was imagining things. I needed proof. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So I got out of the car and walked through those hospital doors, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt like ascending to my own execution. Each ding of the floor numbers was a countdown to devastation. And then I was standing outside room 407, and everything I'd rehearsed, everything I'd planned to say, evaporated from my mind. Through that small rectangular window, I could see shadows moving. I could hear voices. His voice, low and gentle in a way he hadn't spoken to me in years. I pushed open the door, and there it was. Everything Valerie had told me, everything Rosa had documented, everything I'd feared and denied and prayed wasn't true. Marshall sitting on the edge of Janet's hospital bed, feeding her soup with that same tenderness he'd once reserved for me. His hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly, the watch I'd bought him catching the afternoon light as he lifted the spoon to her lips.
He was looking at her the way he used to look at me, before the mortgage and the minivans and the slow, steady erosion of everything we'd once been to each other. He was looking at her like she was his whole world, and I was nothing but an intruder witnessing it. My purse slipped from my fingers, wallet, keys, phone, tissues, all scattering across the sterile floor like pieces of my breaking heart. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot in a library. Marshall's head snapped toward the door. The spoon froze halfway to Janet's mouth, and for one terrible, endless moment, our eyes met across that hospital room. I watched the color drain from his face, watched his mouth open and close like he was trying to find words in a language he'd suddenly forgotten. Janet's hand flew to her belly protectively, her eyes wide with something that looked almost like fear. "Nadia," Marshall whispered, and hearing my name in his mouth, in that room, in that moment, with that woman, felt like being stabbed. Janet tried to sit up, grimacing with the effort, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "Marshall, who?" But I couldn't stay. I couldn't stand there and watch him choose his words carefully, watch him try to explain the unexplainable, watch him attempt to make this nightmare into something reasonable. I turned and ran. My heels clicked frantically against the linoleum as I fled down that endless corridor, past the nurse's station where someone called out, Ma'am, are you okay? Past the other rooms full of other families dealing with their own crises, past the elevators because I couldn't wait, taking the stairs instead, my breath coming in ragged gasps that sounded like sobs. I didn't stop until I reached my car in the parking garage. Only then did I allow myself to fall apart, gripping the steering wheel as everything I'd been holding together for weeks, for years maybe, came crashing down. Sobs tore through my chest like something physical, something that could kill me if I let it. 27 years. 27 years of loyalty and sacrifice and unwavering devotion. 27 years of being the good wife, the understanding wife, the wife who put everyone else first. And he was feeding soup to another woman. Building a nursery for another for his baby. Creating a whole new family while I sat at home wondering why he didn't love me anymore. But as I sat there in that dim parking garage, my vision blurred with tears and my chest heaving with grief, something shifted inside me. The crying stopped. The shaking stopped. And for the first time in months, my mind became crystal clear. I went to that hospital to confront my husband's pregnant mistress, but what I saw in that room changed everything. Because I realized this wasn't just about an affair. This wasn't about him falling out of love with me or having a midlife crisis or any of the other comfortable explanations people use to make infidelity less ugly. This was about a man systematically building a new life with my money, with our resources, with the security I'd helped him create while keeping me legally trapped so he wouldn't have to face the financial consequences of his choices. This was about betrayal so calculated, so complete, that it required something more than tears. It required strategy. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't face the house we'd built together, the bed we'd shared, the life that was now exposed as nothing but an elaborate lie. Instead, I drove straight to Valerie's house and collapsed on her couch while she made chamomile tea I couldn't drink and said soothing things that couldn't reach me. "We need everything," I finally said, my voice hoarse from crying. "Every piece of evidence, every document, every lie. I need to know exactly how deep this goes." Valerie squeezed my hand. "Then that's what we'll get." Over the next week, while Marshall sent me text messages asking where I was and claiming he could explain everything, Valerie and I excavated the full scope of his betrayal. What we found was worse than anything I'd imagined. The hospital records came first. Valerie had a contact in medical billing, someone who owed her a favor and understood what it meant when women needed proof of what they already knew in their bones. The documents arrived in a manila envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. There, in black and white, was the truth I'd been desperately hoping wasn't real. Patient, Janet Marie Ford. Emergency contact, Marshall Jackson. Domestic partner. Attending physician notes, patient presenting with preeclampsia at 27 weeks gestation. Partner, present and involved in care decisions. But it was the last document that made my hand shake so badly, I nearly dropped it. Birth certificate preparation form. Mother, Janet Marie Ford. Father, Marshall Devon Jackson. Proposed name, baby girl Ford Jackson. Ford Jackson. He'd hyphenated their baby's name. Our children, Marcus and Simone, carried only his last name. But this child, this baby born from his affair, would carry both names like some kind of official declaration that this was his real family now. "Nadea, there's more," Valerie said quietly, pulling out her laptop. I recovered deleted text messages from the cloud backup on his phone, the one linked to his email.
She turned the screen toward me and I read words that felt like they were written in a language designed specifically to destroy me. Marshall to Janet. Don't worry about Nadea. She's fragile right now. The kids know not to stress her out with questions. Just focus on staying healthy for our baby girl. Our baby girl. Like I was some distant relative he had to tiptoe around, not the wife he'd promised to cherish for better or worse. Janet to Marshall. When are you going to tell her? I can't keep doing this. Our daughter deserves to have our father's name openly. Marshall to Janet. I know, baby. Soon. I just need to time it right. If I divorce her now, she'll bleed me dry in alimony. I've been married to her for 27 years. The courts will destroy me. I need her to be the one to leave. I need her to walk away first. I read those words 3 times before their full meaning sank in. He wasn't staying out of love or obligation or even guilt. He was staying because divorcing me would cost him money. He'd been setting a trap, manipulating our children, painting me as unstable, all so that when the truth finally came out, I would be the one to file. I would be the one to leave. And he would get to play the victim. There's more, Valerie said, and I almost laughed because how could there possibly be more? How much betrayal could one man pack into a double life? She pulled out receipts, dozens of them, all charged to our joint account, the account I'd trusted him to manage because he was better with finances. Baby crib from Pottery Barn Kids, $1,247. Nursery furniture set, $2,890. Prenatal vitamin subscription, $89 a month for 6 months. My money. Money I'd earned working overtime, money I'd saved by clipping coupons and shopping sales, money that was supposed to secure our retirement, fund our future, provide for the life we'd built together. He'd use it to build a nursery for another woman's baby. I looked at the pile of evidence spread across Valerie's dining room table. Bank statements, hospital records, text messages, receipts, insurance documents. Each piece was a small cut, but together they formed a picture of betrayal so vast, so methodically planned that it took my breath away. He told our children I was fragile, I said slowly, my voice strange and distant. He told them not to stress me out with questions. He's been setting me up for months, making them think I'm unstable so that when this all came out, they'd side with him. Valerie nodded. Classic manipulation. Make the victim look like the problem so nobody questions the abuser. For days, I oscillated between grief and fury. I'd find myself crying in the shower or then screaming into pillows. I'd stare at our wedding photos and feel such overwhelming loss that I couldn't breathe. And then I'd look at those receipts and feel rage so pure it burned away everything else. Marcus called. Mom, where are you? Dad's worried. He says you're not answering his calls and you've been acting strange lately. Acting strange. Like I was the problem. Like I was the one breaking our family apart. Tell your father I'll be home when I'm ready, I said calmly, even as my hand shook with fury. Simone texted. Dad says you might be going through something. Are you okay? Do you need to talk to someone? Going through something. The gaslighting had reached our children. He'd poisoned them against me before I even knew there was a war. But on the 7th night at Valerie's house, something inside me solidified. I looked at all that evidence, all that proof of his calculated cruelty, and I felt the grief burn away, leaving something harder in its place. I was done crying. I was done breaking. I was done being the fragile wife he'd spent months painting me to be. I want to destroy him, I said to Valerie, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. Not just divorce him. I want everyone to know exactly what he did. I want his parents to know. I want our children to see the truth. I want him to face consequences for once in his privileged life. Valerie smiled, not kindly, but with the sharp edge of someone who'd seen too many women broken by men like Marshall. Then let's build a case he can't defend. Let's show him what happens when you underestimate your opponent.
Because that's what Marshall had done. He'd mistaken my kindness for weakness.
He'd confused my loyalty with stupidity. He'd assumed that 27 years of devotion meant I'd simply accept whatever he decided to do with our life. But I wasn't the fragile woman he'd described to our children. I was the woman who'd worked 2 jobs to put him through business school. The woman who'd negotiated insurance claims for 15 years and knew how to read documents for deception. The woman who'd raised 2 children and run a household and built a life from nothing while he climbed his corporate ladder on my back. If he wanted a war, he should have chosen a weaker opponent. Valerie spread a fresh legal pad across her dining room table and clicked her pen with the precision of a general planning a siege. If we're going to do this, we do it right. We need documentation so airtight that he can't lie his way out. We need witnesses, and we need him to incriminate himself one more time. I leaned forward, my hand steady now, my mind clear. Tell me what you need. First, we organize everything chronologically. Bank transfers, insurance documents, hospital records, text messages, all of it in timeline format so anyone can follow the progression of his deception. Second, we need more than just paper. We need his voice. We need him to say out loud what he's been doing. My heart raced. You want me to record him? I want you to give him enough rope to hang himself. Valerie's eyes met mine. Can you do that? Can you talk to him without falling apart? I thought about the woman I'd been 3 weeks ago, the one who cried in parking garages and questioned her own sanity. Then I thought about the woman I was becoming, the one who understood that sometimes love meant letting go and sometimes justice meant fighting back. Yes, I said, I can do that. The next afternoon, I finally answered Marshall's calls. My voice was carefully calibrated, not angry, not accusing, just tired, defeated, exactly what he expected to hear. Nadia, thank God. Where have you been? I've been worried sick. I needed time to think, I said, each word measured and deliberate. The recording app on my phone captured every syllable. About us, about our marriage. Baby, listen, I know things have been hard lately, but we can work through this. We always do. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him nervous. I saw you at the hospital, Marshall. With her. Another pause. Then, carefully, it's not what you think. Then what is it? I kept my voice small, broken. The voice of a woman who could be convinced, manipulated, controlled. Because from where I stood, it looked like you were taking care of someone who isn't your wife. Janet needed help. She doesn't have anyone else, and the baby... He stopped abruptly, realizing his mistake. Your baby, I said softly. Nadia, it's complicated. She needs me right now. She's high risk, and the pregnancy has been difficult, and I couldn't just... You couldn't just... What? Abandon your child? The way you're abandoning me? That's not fair. His voice sharpened with the irritation of a man unused to being questioned. You and I, we've had our time. The kids are grown. We've grown apart. These things happen. But Janet, she's young, she's vulnerable, and this baby needs a father who's present. I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me. Every sentence was another nail in his coffin. Every justification was evidence of his betrayal. So what do you want from me? I asked, playing the part perfectly. A divorce? Is that what this is? He paused, and I could almost hear him recalibrating his strategy. I want us to be mature about this, to handle it like adults. I don't want lawyers and fighting and ugliness. I want us to part as friends. Friends. The man who'd stolen from me, lied to me, used our children against me, and built a second family with my money wanted to be friends. I need time, I said finally. But Marshall, I think we should have a family dinner, all of us, together. Marcus, Simone, your parents, my sister. Before we make any decisions, I want everyone to know where we stand. I want to do this right. You could hear the relief in his voice. He thought he'd won. He thought I was giving up. That's very mature of you, Nadia. Very gracious. I think that's exactly what we need. We set the date for the following Saturday. After I hung up, I played the recording back for Valerie. Marshall's voice filled her living room, admitting everything: the baby, his relationship with Janet, his belief that our marriage was over, his desire to part as friends so he could avoid the legal and financial consequences of divorce.
Perfect, Valerie said, saving the file with a satisfied smile. Absolutely perfect. The next week was a blur of preparation. I compiled photographs, screenshots from Rosa's surveillance footage showing Marshall at prenatal appointments, entering Janet's apartment building, carrying baby furniture. I organized bank statements into a presentation that showed every transfer, every consulting fee, every dollar stolen from our joint account. I printed the insurance documents showing Janet listed as his domestic partner. I prepared copies of the hospital records with baby girl Ford Jackson and Marshall's name as prospective father. Every night I practiced my speech in front of Valerie's mirror. My hands would shake at first, my voice would crack, but I'd start again, and again, and again, until I could deliver every word without trembling, until I could say his name without crying. "You're ready," Valerie said on Friday night, watching me rehearse one final time. But I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready for what I was about to do. I was about to detonate the life we'd built together. I was about to expose the father of my children as a liar and a fraud. I was about to break apart our family in front of the people who loved us most. And yet, as I looked at all that evidence spread across the table, the proof of his systematic betrayal, the documentation of his calculated cruelty, I realized he'd already broken our family. He'd shattered it piece by piece while I was busy trying to hold it together. I wasn't the destroyer. I was just the one brave enough to show everyone what he'd already done. On Saturday morning, I sent out the invitations. Family dinner at the house, 6 p.m. Important announcement about Marshall and me. Please come. We need you all there. Marcus called within an hour. "Mom, is everything okay? Dad said you two have been having some trouble." "Everything will be clear tomorrow night, sweetheart. I promise." Simone texted, "Should I be worried?" I replied, "Just be there. I love you." Marshall's mother called, her voice concerned. "Nadia, dear, what's this about? Are you and Marshall all right?" "We'll talk tomorrow, Helen. I think it's important everyone hears this together." When Marshall came home that evening, the first time I'd seen him since the hospital, he looked relieved. He actually looked relieved. He thought this dinner was my white flag. He thought I was going to stand in front of our family and gracefully bow out of his life so he could move on to his new one without consequences. He hugged me at the door, and I let him, feeling nothing but cold resolve where love used to live. "Thank you for being so understanding about this," he whispered. "I know this isn't easy for you." I pulled back and looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd loved for 27 years, this stranger wearing my husband's face. "No," I said quietly. "It isn't easy, but it's necessary." He smiled, misunderstanding completely. He thought I was crawling back. I was loading ammunition. They started arriving at 5:45. Marcus came first, still in his work clothes from the drive down from Chicago, hugging me tightly and whispering, "Whatever this is, Mom, we'll get through it." Simone arrived moments later with her fiancé, David, her eyes searching for clues I didn't give her. Marshall's parents came next, Helen and Robert, married for 52 years, the kind of couple that still held hands in public. They'd always treated me like a daughter. Helen brought her famous pecan pie, the same one she'd made for every family gathering since Marshall and I got married. My sister Lauren was the last to arrive, and when our eyes met across the foyer, she knew. I told her everything 2 days ago, and she squeezed my hand as she passed, her support silent
but solid. Marshall played his part perfectly. He was charming, warm, the devoted husband welcoming everyone into our home. He kissed my cheek in the entryway where everyone could see. He complimented the roast I'd made. He poured wine and made small talk about Marcus's promotion and Simone's wedding plans, playing the role of proud father and doting husband with the skill of someone who'd been lying for months. "It's so good to see you two working through things," Helen said, patting Marshall's hand as we sat down to eat. "Every marriage goes through rough patches. What matters is fighting for each other." Marshall smiled at me across the table, and I smiled back, my face a mask of calm while my heart hammered against my ribs.
We ate dinner, making pleasant conversation. The weather, upcoming holidays, Marcus's new apartment. I let Marshall steer the conversation, let him relax into the belief that this was exactly what he'd expected. A graceful exit, a mature announcement, a clean break that would cost him nothing. I waited until dessert was served, until Helen's pecan pie sat on everyone's plates, until coffee was poured and everyone was settled and comfortable. Then I stood up. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "Marshall and I do have an announcement to make about our marriage." Marshall nodded, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled away. "But before we get to that, I think everyone should know the full truth about what's been happening in this house, about where Marshall has really been spending his time, about where our money has really been going." Marshall's face changed. The smile died. "Nadia, what are you—" I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the TV mounted on the dining room wall. The TV where we'd watched family movies and holiday specials and Marcus's football games. Now it displayed a spreadsheet of bank transfers. "These are withdrawals from our joint account over the past 8 months. $30,000, all of it going to a woman named Janet Ford." Helen gasped. Robert's fork clattered against his plate. "Nadia, that's not— You're misunderstanding." Marshall stood up, his face flushing red. "Let me play you something." I pressed play on the audio file. Marshall's voice filled our dining room, crystal clear. "Janet needs me right now. She's young, she's vulnerable, and this baby needs a father who's present." Simone's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus stared at his father like he'd never seen him before. "Baby?" Helen whispered, tears already forming in her eyes. "Marshall, what baby?" I clicked to the next slide. Hospital documents. Janet Ford's admission records. Emergency contact, Marshall Jackson. And there, in stark black and white, baby girl Ford Jackson. Prospective father, Marshall Devin Jackson. "You have a baby with another woman?" Robert's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of 52 years of marriage, of trust, of the example he thought he'd set for his son. Marshall held up his hands, his lawyer instincts kicking in. This is a private matter between Nadia and me. This is not appropriate." "What's not appropriate," I said, my voice cutting through his protest like a blade, "is committing insurance fraud by listing your mistress as your domestic partner while you're still married to me." I clicked again. Insurance documents appeared on the screen. Janet Ford listed as domestic partner. Coverage effective 6 months ago. Prenatal care, hospital admissions, all covered under the policy I'd helped pay for through 27 years of marriage. "Or maybe what's not appropriate," I continued, "is using our children as pawns, telling them their mother is fragile, too emotional, too unstable, setting them up to believe I was the problem so that when this all came out, they'd side with you." I clicked to the text messages, the ones he'd sent to Marcus and Simone, the ones painting me as someone who needed to be handled carefully, someone who was falling apart, someone who couldn't be trusted with the truth. Marcus pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor.
Dad, is this real? Did you really say these things about Mom? Son, you have to understand. Your mother has been... Don't, Marcus said, his voice shaking with fury. Don't you dare make this Mom's fault. Simone was crying openly now, her fiancé's arm around her shoulders. How could you? How could you do this to us? To her? Helen had her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Robert sat frozen, staring at his son like he was looking at a stranger. My sister Lauren stood up and moved to stand behind me, her hand on my shoulder, a silent statement of whose side she was on. Marshall tried one more time. You're all overreacting. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I should have been honest sooner. But Nadia and I have been growing apart for years. We're just not the same people we were when we got married. People change. Relationships end. This doesn't have to be... You told Janet you couldn't divorce me because I'd bleed you dry in alimony, I said quietly, playing the final audio clip. His voice filled the room again. If I divorce her now, she'll bleed me dry. I've been married to her for 27 years. The courts will destroy me. I need her to be the one to leave. The silence that followed was deafening. Helen looked at her son with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, disgust mixed with heartbreak. You stayed married to her for money? You used this woman, this good woman who supported you through everything because leaving her would be expensive? Mom, that's not... It's more complicated than... Get out, Robert said, his voice quiet but final. Get out of this house. Dad, you heard him, Marcus said, standing up. Get out. Marshall looked around the table at the faces that had once loved him unconditionally. His children wouldn't meet his eyes. His mother was weeping. His father had turned away. My sister was glaring at him with open hatred. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and walked toward the door, his shoulders tight with barely contained fury. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. You're going to regret this, Nadia, making this public, humiliating me in front of my family. You could have handled this privately, but you chose to destroy me. I met his eyes across the room, and for the first time in 27 years, I felt absolutely nothing for him. No love, no anger, just cold, clear certainty. You destroyed yourself, I said. I just made sure everyone could see it. He walked out of the room, the door slamming behind him with a finality that echoed through the house. And for once, I didn't follow. Valerie filed the divorce petition on Monday morning. I signed the papers in her office, my signature steady and clear, nothing like the trembling, tearful woman who'd collapsed in a parking garage just weeks before. The grounds were extensive and damning. Fraud, infidelity, misappropriation of marital assets, financial deception, and emotional cruelty. He's going to fight this, Valerie warned. Sliding the documents into a manila envelope, men like Marshall always do. He'll claim you're vindictive, that you manipulated the evidence, that you're only doing this for money. I thought about the 27 years I'd given him, the career I'd supported, the home I'd built, the children I'd raised while he climbed his ladder of success on my back. Let him try, I said. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Marshall hired an expensive attorney, Gerald Rothman, known for protecting wealthy men in messy divorces. But even Rothman couldn't argue with the evidence. Bank statements don't lie. Insurance documents don't have agendas. Audio recordings speak for themselves. The preliminary hearing was brutal. Marshall sat across the courtroom in his $1,000 suit, looking every inch the successful attorney, while his lawyer tried to paint me as a bitter, scorned woman seeking revenge. But when Valerie presented the timeline of financial transfers, the insurance fraud documentation, and the hospital records showing Marshall as Janet's domestic partner and father of her child, the judge's expression shifted from neutral to disgusted. Mr. Jackson, Judge Morrison said, peering over her reading glasses, You used marital funds to support a mistress and her unborn child while committing insurance fraud by listing her as your domestic partner. Is that an accurate summary? Marshall's lawyer started to object, but Marshall himself spoke up, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Your Honor, my personal relationship choices are not... Your personal relationship choices became the court's business the moment you used joint marital assets to fund them. And your insurance fraud became everyone's business the moment you broke federal law. She ordered an investigation into the insurance claims. She froze the marital assets, and she set alimony at an amount that made Marshall's face go white. But the legal consequences were just the beginning. The insurance fraud investigation moved to his employer, Marshall's firm, the same firm where he'd made partner, where he'd built his reputation over 2 decades, launched an internal review. 3 weeks after the divorce filing, they placed him on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the investigation. Without pay. I heard it from Marcus, who'd heard it from a colleague who worked at the same firm. Dad's losing it, Mom, he said during one of our weekly phone calls. Calls that had become more frequent since the dinner, since he'd seen the truth. He's calling everyone, trying to get people on his side, but nobody wants to touch this. Insurance fraud is career suicide for a lawyer. The professional fallout rippled outward. Marshall's name appeared in legal journals, not for his courtroom victories, but as a cautionary tale. Colleagues who'd once invited him to golf outings stopped returning his calls. Clients quietly moved their cases to other partners, and then Janet left him. I learned about it through Valerie's network, the invisible web of paralegals, court clerks, and legal assistants who saw everything and shared everything. Janet had given birth to a healthy baby girl 3 weeks early. Marshall was there, playing the devoted father, promising her everything would be fine once the divorce was settled and he had access to his money again. But when the judge's preliminary orders came through, when Janet realized that Marshall's assets were frozen and his income had disappeared, when she understood that the wealthy, successful lawyer she'd attached herself to was now facing financial ruin and potential criminal charges, she vanished, moved back to her hometown in Louisiana with the baby, changed her phone number, blocked him on every platform. The woman he'd destroyed his marriage for, the woman he'd spent $30,000 supporting, the woman carrying the child he'd chosen over his own family, she abandoned him the moment his bank account ran dry. I should have felt satisfaction, vindication, some savage joy at watching him lose everything the way he tried to make me lose everything. But mostly, I felt nothing. Just a distant, clinical observation, like watching a stranger's tragedy unfold on the evening news. I saw him once, about 2 months after the divorce proceedings began. I was leaving Valerie's office, and he was walking into the courthouse for another hearing. He looked diminished somehow, his suit wrinkled, his hair uncharacteristically messy, his face drawn and exhausted. Our eyes met across the parking lot. For a moment, I saw something in his expression. Regret, maybe? Or recognition of what he lost? But then his face hardened, and he turned away, shoulders hunched against the cold November wind. I drove home to the house that was now legally mine. The judge had granted me exclusive use of the marital home pending the final divorce decree. I walked through rooms that used to feel like a prison of memories, but now felt like possibility. I made tea in the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals for a man who'd never deserved them. I sat in the living room where we'd raised our children, where we'd celebrated holidays, where I'd built a life that turned out to be constructed on lies. But I wasn't trapped in those memories anymore. They were just rooms now, just walls and furniture. The ghosts had been exorcised the moment I'd exposed the truth. Simone came to visit that weekend. She'd been coming more often lately, helping me sort through things, supporting me in ways I'd never expected. We were boxing up Marshall's remaining belongings when she paused, holding one of his old law school textbooks. "Mom," she said quietly, "do you hate him?" I considered the question carefully. Did I hate the man who's stolen from me, lied to me, manipulated our children, and tried to destroy me to avoid consequences? No, I said finally. I don't hate him. I just don't feel anything for him at all anymore, and maybe that's worse. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. He called me yesterday, asked if I'd talk to you, try to get you to be reasonable about the settlement. What did you tell him? I told him that for the first time in my life, I'm seeing what you're really made of. And it's steel, Mom. It's always been steel. The final divorce hearing took place on a Wednesday morning in late March. Spring was pushing through the last remnants of winter, and the courthouse steps were lined with daffodils that hadn't been there the last time I'd walked through those doors. I wore a cream-colored dress, not white, not black, just something light and new that I'd bought for myself with money I'd earned. Valerie stood beside me as the judge read through the final decree, her hand occasionally squeezing mine when the legal language got thick with terms like dissolution of marriage and equitable distribution. But I didn't need the legalese to understand what was happening. After 27 years of marriage, I was becoming unmarried. After 27 years of being Marshall's wife, I was becoming just Nedea again. When the judge's gavel finally fell, declaring the marriage legally dissolved, I felt something release in my chest, something that had been clenched tight for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. Outside the courthouse, standing in the spring sunshine with cherry blossoms drifting down like snow, I looked at my left hand. The wedding ring had left a permanent indent in my finger, a groove worn deep by 27 years of wearing it. I twisted it off slowly, feeling the unfamiliar lightness of my bare hand. I held it for a moment, this circle of gold that had once meant forever. Then I dropped it into my purse, zipped the compartment closed, and walked toward my car. Alone, but free. I didn't keep the house. Too many memories lived in those walls, and I wanted to build something new, something that belonged only to me. I found a small apartment overlooking Discovery Green, 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, windows that let in so much light it felt like living inside sunshine. It was quiet, peaceful, mine. Marcus helped me move in, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs while making jokes about my collection of coffee mugs. Simone came the following weekend and helped me hang curtains, both of us laughing when we couldn't figure out the curtain rod instructions and had to call her fiancé for help. My relationship with my children had shifted after the divorce. They saw me differently now. Not just as their mother, but as a woman who'd survived something devastating and come out whole on the other side. We talked more openly, laughed more freely. They called me not out of obligation, but because they wanted to hear my voice. I joined a divorce recovery group at the community center. 12 women sitting in a circle every Thursday evening, sharing stories of betrayal and survival. I listened to their pain and recognized my own. I shared my story and watched them nod in understanding. We were strangers bound by similar wounds, healing together in the way that only people who've survived the same fire can understand. I also started painting, something I'd loved as a girl but abandoned when life got busy with marriage and children and building someone else's dreams. I bought watercolors and cheap canvases from the craft store, and I painted badly at first, awkward landscapes and lopsided still lifes that made me laugh at my own lack of skill. But it didn't matter if they were good. They were mine, and that's what mattered most. If you're enjoying this journey of rediscovery and resilience, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new stories of healing, hope,
and finding yourself again.